Hey everyone, I know, we have all done it. Ignore those lesser known games, assuming they are not worth our time. But is that actually true? Just because a game isn't mainstream doesn't mean it is bad. More often than not, it is simply overlooked. In any case, I cannot talk for everyone, but for myself, and right away I will say, yes, they are worth playing. But now why do I bring this question, or what is the main idea? A few days ago I was at the office, waiting for the coffee machine to be free. The thing is that one colleague was there, and I knew he liked to play, but I rarely spoken with him, so I randomly asked, "Hey, what have you been playing lately?" Kinda shy he says, it's one of these games that looks from a $1 store. To be honest, my thought was, no, he's most likely playing a phone game or an indie game from Steam. But he continues, kinda stuttering he says, it is named the Unicorn Overlord. Now, my expression definitely changed after hearing that because I consider that game something extraordinary. Whatever the case, he continued with something like, the story isn't engaging, it is weird, and everything was pointing in the same line. After hearing him, I knew what was happening. And most likely he thought I was going to judge him. And I remember those experiences some decades ago, where people asked me, "Hey, what are you playing?" Of course, explaining some RPGs and things like that it's kinda complicated, and oftentimes the casual community looks at you with questioning eyes, like, boring? Now, I don't know about your country, but here somewhere around the mid-90s, on arcades you were able to see people play The King of Fighters, Street Fighter, Mega Man, Metal Slug, Mario Bros, and things like that. Let's say the popular games. Of course, as time passed, some video games also changed. To Resident Evil, Mario Kart, Super Smash Bros. Melee, Halo, Gran Turismo, Gears of War, Dark Souls. You know, the games that 90% of casual players knew about. It is fair to say that when you are young and you share this hobby with other friends, most likely they are going to recommend you or even share their video games with you. So I would say, it is also related to who you interact with. But as you get older, you may drift into new activities or dive some more into gaming. So then you had young me rolling between some of those popular games and weird things that you were able to get stupidly cheap for the PlayStation. Now, around those years I had no money to buy games, so I used to play at a friend's house the classic disc that has hundreds of weird games, or that we were not able to read. That is how I got to know a lot of Japanese games back in those days. But have you ever had someone judge your game choices before you even had the chance to explain them? Yep, me too. So of course, every time I broke those topics, at least around those years, no one paid attention. And sure, putting all things on the table, why would anyone want to spend their money on games that may or may not be entertaining? And why would I hear a random dude talking about Madou Monogatari when I have heard The King of Fighters much more times? And yes, I definitely agree. Because when I started working and getting paid, my eyes looked at the famous and known titles. For example, Metroid Fusion, The Legend of Zelda, and things like that. For multiple reasons, I wasn't able to keep on playing weird games, and let's say that I was your average player jumping between the aforementioned titles, aka the famous ones. At least on my case, what happened is that I developed this idea that if it wasn't a famous game, it was trash. It had to play good, looked good, etc, etc. I've showed parts of my collection. I had all those famous titles, and I knew where to spend my money. But also, it is fair to say that as time passed and I was able to get more money, I was also placing my expectations on something that the industry isn't able to meet, because it is unrealistic. That's how the light that shines inside of me was turning off, and I am sure that it happens to a lot of us. We want to get better stories, graphics, mechanics, and things like that. And those are the classic criteria we look at while playing. And don't you dare use the same known mechanics, because we are going to trash your entry. At least that is what commonly happens with the so-called AAA, or the behavior I have seen, and also what I experienced. Even when my handheld journey was still kinda obscure, for what I see as commonly referred titles, I wanted my freaking console games to be as powerful as possible. So of course, when you get to see some Atlus, Vanillaware, Steam compile games, well, we could say that they lag on different fronts. Then again, question of why would I spend my money on those games? If I can get a Metal Gear Solid 2, Devil May Cry, Carlos Duty and things like that. In easy terms, échale aguacate a esa madre pa que sepa rico. Yep, the unrealistic expectations. You know the industry is bound to mess up real good, and the bigger it is, the harder the fall. That is a known fact, but also because sometimes those cherished titles radically change, trying to adapt on today's standards, ironically missing the mark, and they collapse like a lead ship. That part of the industry grew stagnant for me, and while I'm your average enjoyer, and oftentimes I have fun with pretty much whatever, it was for those same reasons that I was indeed setting my expectations too high. Playing those anticipated titles lost their charm, and the truth is that there were moments where I preferred to spend more time playing online games with my friends than listening to the crap they bring to the E3, or stupid things like the so-called best games of the year. That is when once again I start to check weird titles. I wanted to be surprised, and that is how I got to know a lot of the games I know nowadays. While a lot of times they have similar or the same mechanics as the famous ones, I knew perfectly well that my expectations were kept on check, and a good number of times I get my video games like this. I see the title, front cover, some of the images, I prefer they have gameplay and things like that, and then be like, this one, meh, or yeah, I have no idea what it is but seems like fun. Bugged and into the black hole. Of course, it is clear that a good number of times they may be possible, but I don't think too much between lines. Compared when I see something I was expecting once again not reach my expectations, that is when it grinds my gears some more. Another irony of your average enjoyer, because I have fun, but I am not as forgiving because I know there is a lot of money in between, so that is pretty much my experience as a player. But now as someone who reviews games, it has helped me to identify different kinds of entries, those where companies just want to grab money, those appealing to old memories, etc, etc. Sometimes there are games I cannot really defend, but also I have found those weird gems that most people overlook. Perhaps they are not the best, but I enjoy them much more than many other titles. At the end of the day, gaming isn't just about hype or budgets, it's about fun, and sometimes the best gaming experiences come from places you least expect. So yeah, I don't regret getting many of these $1 store entries. I hope you found this video interesting. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.